Hello, my name is Amy. Welcome to my channel. I almost want to say welcome to tea time with Amy, but most of the time I'm not drinking tea. I'm drinking a beer or a coffee or wine or something like that. Most of my videos have the same format with the lack of lighting because I am transitioning fully into Gollum now that we are at home, and I don't like bright lights. And I usually like to enjoy like a beer or wine glass in the evenings after dinner or with my dinner. I can already tell you this video is going to be long. I just started filming it. There's no script or anything, so I honestly don't know how long it's going to get. But Rosie Cockshut, whose channel I'll link below, she is awesome, by the way. She commented in my previous video that the kind of casual chat format with the alcohol reminded her of being out at a bar with friends. And I was thinking, maybe instead of tea time with Amy, like what do we call this? Like, night out at the pub with Amy? Evening at the pub with Amy? I kind of like that. It doesn't have the same ring to it as tea time with Amy, but it's more fitting considering what we're doing. So it's only been a few days since I last spoke to everybody, but I've read several books since then, and I've also started several other books, and they were all good books. Like, it's been a great couple of days for reading. You know, I really believed that this weekend I would finish Hades. You know what would be really cool? If I could live one day as somebody who had just a bit of self-discipline, because I don't have any. Instead of playing Hades, I ended up revisiting an old favorite, Fire Emblem Three Houses, which, as I mentioned before, is the game that drove me to my sick bed because I was so addicted to it. I'm still only halfway through. There are 4 routes you can complete, and I've only gotten through 2 of them. So they were both Edelgard routes. So this is a tactical RPG game, and it does have a plot. Because, you know, I like to talk about stories in games, and in this game you play as this young professor who is teaching like this class of students, and you take them into battle with you. You learn about them, their stories, you build up their skills, you, like, influence where they go in their lives, and then there's this main plot in the background that is going to progress no matter what. So depending on which route you pick, you will side with one side or the other when like the big fork in the road happens in the story. So you're in this kingdom where it's like a fantasy medieval setting where people fight with like swords, and like they can control like I guess magic in the form of these things called crests, and like those are like kind of almost like a hereditary thing, so they're mostly inherited through like bloodlines. Your character has a very rare crest, and the students that you teach for the most part like have crests as well, but not all of them. Basically at the very beginning you're told to choose which house leader you want to like kind of mentor, and like after that like you end up teaching the students from that house, and each house is made up of students from like 3 different countries. So there's the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, and the Golden Deer. I went, like I said, the Edelgard route, so I was working with students from the Black Eagles house. Edelgard is meant to become the next empress of her kingdom, and like the other 2 also have you know, their own thrones to inherit. But regardless of which kingdom they're from, the main source of power in this entire area is the church, like the monastery where your school is. I remember before I played this game, my friends were telling me like, oh yeah, there are a lot of hot guys in this game, so you get to romance like these characters as you're playing them. And I didn't know that you were going to be playing as their professor.
Call the police.
Like, I thought like, okay, maybe you're like another student. Then I realized like, you know, you were going to have like a teaching aspect. I said maybe I'm a graduate assistant, a TA. Like, it's still kind of weird to date a student as a, you know, TA, but at least like, you know, as a TA, most likely you're a fellow student as well. You're just a bit older. But that was not the case. As soon as I agreed to teach, like the students came up to me and they were like, hey, professor. And you know what? I went, hell no, I ain't dating any of these kids. This is too close to real life. Like, these kids are around the same age as like my students that I teach, and while I in the game am younger than I am in real life, I still went, I have this policy, I don't do the whole student-teacher romance thing, that's just not for me. Besides, how can you date these students? You're basically like their aunt. I mean, I play as a dude, So, like, your main character, Byleth, you can be, like, a man or a woman. I chose to be a man, but, like, even then, like, so I'm, like, I guess an uncle to them, or an older brother in a way, but I'm, like, helping them along. Like, some of them are uncertain about which career paths they want to choose, meaning which, like, warrior class they want to be part of, and I, like, kind of, like, give them advice, and at the very beginning, like, some of them, they're insecure, like, they're just kind of like finding their footing, and then I take them in a battle and I watch them develop, and like after a while, like I felt like what I imagined a mother would feel, like this pride that my students were developing, and like one of the girls slayed her first monster by herself. I was like, like, you know, my babies, like they're growing up. How can you date somebody after going through that experience with them as their teacher figure? Unfortunately, because of the way the game is set up so that you can romance these students. I mean, there's a time skip later on, so you come back and you're no longer really their professor, but still, because the game is set up like that, I ended up having to dodge flirtatious students and come-ons around every corner. It felt like there's a whole arc with like a winter ball where you could choose to meet one of your students up in like this tower, which was not happening, but you know, the students still want it to happen. Like I kept hearing, "Professor, are you taking anybody to the ball? Hint, hint." And I was like, oh hell no. Like, I am on duty that night. I am not going with anybody. But even so, during the ball, like I said, I'm playing as a dude. And Claude, who I admit is very attractive, and if he weren't my student, I understand I would want to pursue him. He, like, basically takes me out to dance on the dance floor, and, like, he winks at me, and I'm like, charming fucker, but it's not happening. I didn't even choose anybody when they said, who do you want to meet up at the tower? And yet they still tried to throw somebody at me based on what they thought was like my closest relationship among the students, and I ended up having to basically choose all the dialogue options to get the hell out of there, because I, like I said, am not interested in dating any of my students, fictional or not. I just want to go into battle, you know, like it's a tactical RPG. Like I said, I want to go into battle, I want to win, I want to, like, want the story to progress. Like, I wish there was an option for me to hook the students up with each other, because I do want that. Like, there are many students where I'm like, you know, they would be good together, but not with me. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Anyways, enough of that. Let's move on to the books. Yesterday I sat down and I read through the majority of, and here, Italian people, beware. I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I'm so sorry, I just had to do that. This is Susanna Clarke's second book. She hasn't published a book in basically, I think, 15 or 16 years. Like, it's been a long time since Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell came out. I read that when I was maybe 13 or 14. And I'm like, actually, yeah, that timeline makes sense considering how old I am now. But yeah, I read that book when it first came out, and I honestly don't remember anything about it, because while I like to think that I was a very advanced reader as a preteen and a teenager, and I kind of was, like, in terms of I'm reading words and I'm able to understand most of them, but the wisdom and like any humor, philosophy just flew over my head, as you will see when I talk about the other book that I finished later on. But yeah, I might have to go back and reread Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because I really don't remember anything about it, and I really liked Piranesi. So I think it's time to revisit Susanna Clarke's previous work. It's very unique. Like, I know I've been saying that about anything from like games to books, but this book, part of the fun of it, I guess you could call it, is in the discovery, like the unlocking of various secrets as you're going along. So at the very beginning, the book is told in first person POV, which I normally hate. I'm like, oh no, not first person. There's only a few instances where that really, really works, but in this case, it worked very well. So you're this guy who is about, like, he's guessing that he's about 30 to 35 years old, so around my age, I guess, but he doesn't know anything about himself, or like how long he's been where he, you know, is, and where he is also a fascinating part of the mystery of this book. Like, he is in this gigantic house that honestly feels kind of like a giant temple or museum because of all the the architecture that is described. It really makes me think of like the Greek, like the Parthenon. And he talks about how in like many of the halls that he goes through, like the giant rooms that he passes through every day, he basically has mapped out this place. Like not all of it. Like there's places like I think he calls them the far reaches, where he hasn't been to, but for the most part he's been through like a good chunk of this house, and it doesn't seem to end. And it is his entire world. Like this is pretty much his world, and in a way, like it has like its own like basically ecosystem. Like it's like he can fish, the tides go in and out. There is weather in certain parts of the house, and like there are birds and other creatures living there. He picks out this room that he says is his favorite room, and it has his favorite statue in it, I believe. Like there are several statues of minotaurs, and there's also this statue of a faun. Like I'm assuming that's the one from the cover. And I actually thought that like basically I was on, like, after my whole Hades run that I was talking about in my last video, I was on a mythology kick, and I went, oh, like maybe I'll read Piranesi, because I've seen it pop up on like the bestseller list for like a couple weeks now, and there's a picture on the cover of a faun. So I assumed that this story was going to be told from the point of view of a faun, and I was very wrong. He's human, and the faun is his favorite statue in this room, and Piranesi is the name that the only other person in this whole place that he's ever encountered has given him. He has no idea why he calls him that, and honestly I had no idea why either. I don't know anything like about any dude named Piranesi, but I looked it up after I finished reading, and it turns out there's a printmaker, an artist from like Italy a couple hundred years ago named Piranesi, and I'm wondering, I was wondering if that was part of the inspiration, and it turns out it was. Like I looked up an interview with Susanna Clark, and she says that after she wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't know exactly how that works, but she says she was always tired, and it was hard for her to write, and like that's why she hasn't written a sequel yet for Jonathan Strange. And she ended up writing this book instead, and she says that she felt trapped because she was, just stuck in her house, bedridden. Piranesi is technically trapped as well. Like he's stuck in this house for the most part by himself, and he can't really get out of it because he hasn't navigated through the whole thing. I don't think anybody has, but he doesn't feel like he is trapped. Like he basically feels like he's made a life for himself here. Like he knows where to fish, when to fish, like he tracks the tides going in and out. He's like a hermit pretty much in an island. There's really no difference. And he's made friends with the birds. In fact, like he has this calendaring system. Like he keeps a series of journals, and that's what we are reading as we go along the story. So he labels the years by kind of what happens. So like example would be like the 31st day in the 5th month of the year the albatross came. Like that was a big incident for him, the year the albatross came, or the day the albatross came. So he like talks about that event. And what really struck me about this book was that even though he is being left to fend for himself pretty much, just like fishing in this house, and he has no friends or anything, like he can still find his own happiness. Like there's just something about being cut off from the world that forces you to kind of re-examine the way you perceive things, like how you like what you find important, what you think is beautiful. He's happy when he has a one place to sleep, and just it's a very simple existence. However, he is not completely alone. Like I said, there's that other guy that gave him the name, and he calls him the Other with the capital O, and this guy appears only maybe like twice a week, like Tuesdays and Thursdays are when they have their regular meetings. And I was unsure at first when I met this guy through Piranesi. Like I went, what is his deal? Like he is this he's described as maybe being in his 50s and being rather good looking, and he is always very sharply dressed. And Piranesi, in contrast, is in like really worn out clothes. And the weird thing is, like, this guy is able to procure items that Piranesi can't. Like, you know, like I said, like he has to kind of make his own things, and but he's able to procure like shoes, socks, pens, journals, like paper for Piranesi. And we don't know why. Like, Piranesi's theory is that the house is benevolent. Like, he sees it as almost like a living entity, like a god, and it bestows like favors. And like he said that the house has decided to give the other more like more of a bounty. Like, the other gives him a sandwich at one point, and he's like, oh, that like the house must have decided that because I, Piranesi, have the ability to fish and navigate through the house, because the other guy, he can't find his way around. He's like me, he's directionally challenged. And well, actually no, he's not directionally challenged, but he doesn't know his way around. He can't be bothered to go beyond a certain hall, and I wouldn't dare to either, just because I'm so bad at directions. So because of his inability to basically survive on his own, the house has decided that it has to help him out by giving him all these things. And Piranesi, who can survive on his own for the most part, isn't given like the same help. At least that's his theory. And he also finds like skeletons in the house, and he finds like he calls himself the 15th person because he you know, is younger than the other, and he finds 13 skeletons, and they're like various ages, men and women. And he has like kind of a theory about why they're there. Like, example, he finds one of a folded up child, and it's a girl, and he thinks that maybe this girl is meant to grow up to be his wife. Like, he doesn't know how long he's been there. Like, maybe he and the girl came at the same time. And you know, when I was reading, I was thinking, you know, maybe they're part of like a scientific experiment, like in Cabin in the Woods, where like there's a massive experiment going on, and they're like lab rats pretty much. But then and I started thinking maybe the other is one of the scientists, since he comes and goes. And then I went, maybe they're like living in a post-apocalyptic world, and like this house is like one of the last standing buildings in the area or something. But that wouldn't make sense, because the other can, like I said, produce brand new shoes out of nowhere. So you can't do that without like a factory to manufacture it. So what is going on? I don't want to spoil it for you guys, because like I said, part of the like what makes this book so great is that it just throws all of these surprises at you. Like, it kind of like crosses over to different genres. Like, I was like, is this sci-fi? Is this fantasy? Is this thriller? Is it a mystery? In a way, it's kind of all of them. While wandering around one day, like, he finds like ripped up pieces of paper, and he pieces them together, and he finds out that like there's something else going on. Like, somebody wrote this, and he doesn't remember if it's him or not. And like he's and then the other warns him that there is another person in the house. Like, he senses there's someone there, and then the other says, stay away from the 16th person, because they're going to drive you mad. It's a wild ride, everybody. And I loved it. Like, I till the end was guessing. Like, I mean, at a certain point I went, okay, I think I kind of see where this is going. But even then, like secrets were revealed that I did not consider. And it's just such a lovely book, and it won't take you that long to read. So I recommend that if you have like maybe like just a day or a couple hours even, just sit down and read it. I think you will enjoy yourself. The other book I finished was the audiobook for Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, and I read this book so long ago. This is before I decided to switch to ebooks only. I actually own a print copy of it. It's sitting inside my room, but I decided to listen to the audiobook instead, because I heard it was good. So I went, okay, you know what, I'm just going to listen to it, because it's like, you know, I don't like to reread things very often, just because I have so many books on my list that I need to get through that rereading a book seems almost like a waste. But as I discovered after reading this, I should have learned my lesson by now, because I've reread several books that I read when I was younger, and changed my mind about them completely now that I'm older. And also, like, I just don't remember like plots as well as I used to. So like, you know, it's about time I reread some things. But yeah, I'm just going to listen to the audiobook so I can like do other things while listening, like clean and stuff like that. But yeah, like, so Good Omens, for anyone who doesn't know, I think everyone's read this book before, but it's about, it's kind of craptastic, as I like to label it. It's like a parody of like the story of good and evil, heaven and hell, like the Armageddon, the end of the world. So the two main characters are Crowley and Aziraphale. I always thought Crowley's name was pronounced as Crowley because of Supernatural, but now I'm wondering if maybe his name is Crowley but pronounced with like an Irish accent or something, and because Supernatural is set in the US, everybody just Americanized it and it became Crowley. I'm trying to think, like, how would you pronounce Crowley? Like, oh my god, I can't even, like I said, I am terrible with accents and languages. So I don't know, but I can kind of hear it in my head, like maybe that's how it came to be. But anyways, like the audiobook narrator called him Crowley, so I'm just going to call him Crowley. Crowley is a demon, and in fact he's the demon that took the form of a serpent and convinced Eve to eat the apple back in the Garden of Eden. And Aziraphale is the angel who I think was guarding the Garden of Eden. And I am not Christian, so I have no like almost like cultural background for this, I guess. Like, I didn't grow up with these stories. I did read the first book of the Bible. Is it called Genesis? But yeah, I read that when I was in college just out of curiosity. But when you don't have like that kind of like a Sunday school background, like I feel like the stories just sound almost like gibberish to you. At least they kind of did to me. The main takeaway that I got from the story of Adam and Eve is that Eve didn't really force Adam to do it. She just kind of asked him if he wanted to, and he just ate the apple along with her. And then once God found out, Adam went, it was Eve, like she did it. And I remember that pissed me off so much. I was just like, you fucking snitch. Like, it was, she didn't hold a gun to your head. Like, you could have said, nah, no thanks, I don't think we should. Or you do it and I don't want to do it, but you decided to just go along with it. It's all your own damn fault. Anyways, so those are the two main characters, and like where we are at the very beginning of the book, they have basically gone natives. Like, they have been living on Earth for about 6,000 years since like the fall, and they've really adapted to like the human world. Like, Aziraphale owns a bookstore, except he doesn't want customers as he's mainly a book collector. He just has a store like because that's where he stores his books. And Crowley lives life like the way that you would picture like a young, wealthy, good-looking bachelor live. He has a nice flat, he has up-to-date technology, he wears sunglasses everywhere, and he has a nice like classic car that he basically controls through magic, so he doesn't actually have to like work on it or fix it up or anything like that. It just looks well kept. At the very beginning of the book, Crowley is ordered by like the Duke of Hell and some other like higher-ups down there to assist in this scheme to basically plant the Antichrist, like the son of the devil, in the house of an American diplomat. And the scheme goes wrong because of the people involved, like the people that they got to work with them on it, like basically fuck it up, and the children get swapped into the wrong houses. The Antichrist ends up going home with this ordinary family in this small town called Tadfield, and the diplomat's son, who is named Warlock because they thought that was the Antichrist, is obviously not the Antichrist. So he grows up trying like with angelic and demonic influences, like in the form of like the gardener, the nanny, trying to convince him or sway him to their side. And of course it doesn't work because, like I said, he's not really the Antichrist, and the Antichrist himself is raised as a human, and that and he leads like this little gang of kids called, like, they refer to as the them by the people in the village because I guess they terrorize them all the time. I guess they're those kids that I myself would have looked at and gone, hooligans, maybe a couple of years ago. But it's such a funny book. when I was listening to it, I was laughing out loud, and I was thinking, like, I have my headphones on, my neighbors must think I'm insane because all they hear is just me laughing and no basis for my laughter. But it's just, I can't help it. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett are so fucking funny. Like, they're, like I said, these things flew over my head when I was younger. I feel like I was almost disappointed when I was a kid because I expected to be laughing out loud, and I wasn't laughing out loud. I went, this is kind of funny, but not really. But now that I'm older, I'm like, oh my god, it is so freaking funny. But I think part of that just comes with having lived a life and understanding more about politics and the world and all that good stuff. But yeah, like, there's like just so many things that they do that they're just so clever. And Aziraphale and Crowley's relationship itself, my god, like, I remember everybody I know ships them together pretty much. They're like, yeah, like, they're basically a canon couple. And when I was younger, I read it and I went, oh, you know, like, I can see why people would ship them together, but I don't think they're canon. But now I'm just, when I was listening to it, I went, how could I have thought otherwise? Like, they are very obviously like a couple. Like, if I had met them in real life the way Anathema Device does in that one scene where they give her a ride home, I would have also assumed that they were together. Another thing I thought was funny was that the first time I read this, I thought I was Aziraphale. I said, if I am a character in here, I am Aziraphale, because, like, you know, I also want, like, I would, like, love to own a bookstore. Have you ever seen the series Black Books? It's about this bookshop owner that's just really grouchy, and he wants to own a bookshop, but he doesn't want any customers. Like, that was kind of like me. Like, I want to own a bookstore, but I don't actually want to deal with any customers. I've since concluded that the bookstore life is not for me. But yeah, upon rereading this book, I now know that there is no way I'm Aziraphale. I am 100% Crowley. Like, from everything, like, the way that he behaves, like, to his thought process, even the scene where, like, he's trying to convince Aziraphale. Like, so now that Adam, the Antichrist, is 11 years old, like, he's supposed to start or initiate the apocalypse, the end of the world. And like I said, Aziraphale and Crowley have gone native, and they don't want to see the world end because they quite like living there. To convince Aziraphale to help him stop the end of the world, Crowley says, you know, our side has all the musicians. Like, imagine if you won. There would only be a heavenly choir. How awful would that be? And then they talk about how, then Crowley says, you know, if the seas were to boil, all the fish and, like, sea creatures would die, and that's a lot of seafood and gumbo gone to waste. And that is honestly how I think. Like, I love sea creatures, but, like, I too would think, my god, what a waste of seafood. Sometimes when I'm at the zoo, I look at the animals and I go, I wonder if that thing's edible. I'm not a sociopath, I swear. I'm not going to actually eat them, but I do wonder, like, you know, like, I can't help but think when I look at anything, like, whether or not I can eat it. I'm kind of excited because now that I've done this reread, I can finally go and watch the Amazon Prime series with David Tennant and Michael Sheen. So the first time I read Good Omens, I wasn't really sure who I wanted to play Crowley and Aziraphale. And then I saw X-Men First Class and 300, and I went, it has to be Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy. But guess who I cast as which character? And then I saw that David Tennant and Michael Sheen were going to play them. And I don't know, like, now that I'm, like listening to the book, like, I can see David Tennant as Crowley. Like, he is Crowley in my head. And I do see Michael Sheen as Aziraphale sometimes, but I still, I alternate between him and, like, James McAvoy, because I do picture a younger Aziraphale. Actually, no, I think they're about the same age. James McAvoy just looks really young. But yeah, David Tennant as Crowley is just kind of stuck in my head, with the short hair, though, not the long, horribly dyed red hair in the trailer. Maybe once I've actually seen the Amazon series, I will change my mind and I will go, yes, for sure, David Tennant and Michael Sheen are cemented in my head as these two characters, but for now, that's kind of what I'm picturing. Right after I finished Piranesi, I started reading Ballad of the Whiskey Robber, which I mentioned in one of my previous videos. I haven't gotten very far in it, but it's about this guy who, he's described as phone your friends handsome, which I get what that means. Like, sometimes you see a hot dude in the street and you're like, shit, that guy is really good looking, and you text all your friends, you go, I just saw this hot guy, he looks like this, blah blah. But yeah, like, so I'm imagining Chris or Liam Hemsworth, like somebody who everybody would phone their friends about, who I'm not super attracted to, but I would find attractive. He's somebody who's worked many jobs. Like he's been like a goalkeeper for a hockey team. Apparently he was very bad at it, or either that other team was just bad. And he's also worked as a grave digger, and like, you know, his main thing was bank robbery, of course. I was wondering where the whiskey robber thing came from. I don't think he actually stole any whiskey. From what I've gotten from like the parts I've read so far, like maybe he just smelled like whiskey, like he just likes to drink whiskey a lot. Maybe like it's like if like I were a bank robber and I always smelled of beer or coffee or whatever, depending on what time of day it is. But yeah, since I haven't gotten very far in it, like so far I've gotten like a history lesson of Hungary, which is very helpful because I don't really know anything about Hungary. One of my best friends dated this Hungarian guy, and they were in a long distance relationship for like a year or two. Yeah, that one crashed and burned pretty badly, but I can't say that we didn't see it coming. But thanks to that, like I kind of know a little tiny bit. Like basically Hungary is now on the map because of that. Like, I mean, I kind of knew about it from like, you know, World War I, World War II history and everything. But like since she dated this guy, we were like, oh, you know, Hungary's here, and like, you know, here are the common names and like the culture, blah, blah. Like we knew that mostly because of him, and also because right after I graduated college, the first apartment I lived in, like while I was working my first ever job, the landlord was a Hungarian guy and his wife. I went into their apartment at one point because like I was, you know, paying my rent, and like he needed to give me something. So I like saw like they had like the Hungarian like painted eggs and like just like little trinkets around their house, and like that's how I've started to be able to identify like, oh, this is Eastern European versus Western European. So this first part is just going into the history about how like Hungary has never really been like a big country in terms of power or anything. Their biggest claim to fame was when they were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but we all know how that ended with World War One. And like after the war, like they were forced to pay reparations, and they talked about how like the aid organizations, or like when they were giving like providing aid to people, they provided a lot of aid to Austria and barely anything to Hungary. You know, now that they're like split up and everything, like Hungary just did not get as much attention. I'm assuming it's like the United States where the cities get a lot more attention than if you're in a rural area after a disaster. I admit I myself don't consider the rural areas as much either, just because I just don't think about the fact that there are people living there, which is wrong, but it's just like, you know, you think of the cities first, that's what the news are covering. But yeah, Julian Rubinstein talks about how like Hungary like fell under Soviet control, along with like Romania and a bunch of other Eastern European countries, that bloc next to I think they they were called like the Russian satellite states. I don't think Hungary itself was part of that, but like basically it's just like this giant block of states that were under the control of the Soviet Union. And did you know that Transylvania used to be part of Hungary? I did not know that. They said that Transylvania was ceded to Romania after World War One. Because Hungary lost and had to give up 2/3 of its land. So in Dracula, which I've always assumed was set in Romania, were they actually in Hungary? And like now that I'm thinking about that, remember I said I read The Strain and I was trying to figure out like were they in Poland or Romania? Were they actually in Hungary? Like, oh my god, so many questions, like geography. I'm an American. We didn't get much of an education when it came to geography or history or really anything involving anything outside the United States, come to think of it. And I also learned that there was a point where, like I guess young people in Hungary tried to stage a coup, and they like tried to overthrow the government. And in the West, we were like, yeah, go ahead and do that. Like, we support this uprising. And then once they actually successfully seized power, like before the military got there to oust them again, they said, you know, hey, people in the West, or like US, England, like we managed to do it, like come help us out since you support us. And then the US and England were just too obsessed with the Suez Canal in Egypt, and they didn't come to their aid, so they were rapidly just taken over again by the military. And you know, like it's just another in a long series of times that the US has failed certain countries whose uprisings or coups they supported. I'm really liking the humorous tone of this book. I didn't expect it to be funny, but the way it's written, like even at the very beginning, oh shit, sorry, that's my freezer, the ice maker is going crazy. Yeah, at the very beginning they have like this cast list laid out as if you're like watching a play or something. And while I wish that Julian Rubinstein had included footnotes, because there are some things that he talks about that I'm like, oh, it'll be nice if we inserted a footnote right here, but he didn't. He has this very entertaining way of telling us a nonfiction story. So I am looking forward to reading the rest of this book. I also started the audiobook for The Memory Police, which is a book that's translated from Japanese by Stephen Snyder. The original Japanese version was written by Yoko Ogawa. The book is set on this island. I'm just going to assume it's one of the Japanese islands. And it's a place where suddenly things just get forgotten. I don't know who decides that it's to be forgotten, but for example, you could wake up one day and find out that suddenly hair ribbons are banned. It's no longer a thing. And everybody has to bring their hair ribbons to the beach and or where the bonfire, whatever, get rid of it. And all traces of this item are erased. So at the very beginning, the narrator is a child and she's listening to her mom, who has this drawer of basically contraband items. It's like she has a bottle of perfume. She said, back when I was young, women or girls used to wear perfume out on dates, and then one day perfume was banned and everybody had to throw away their perfume bottles, but she has this bottle hidden away. And usually right after this, everyone just forgets. You throw your item away and then it gets forgotten. And you just don't remember that it ever existed at all, no matter how much it meant to you before. But for some reason, the main character's mom is able to remember. She thinks it's because she thinks about the items a lot, but that can't be it, because I'm sure there are memories that people want to hold on to that they're just not able to. But for some reason, the narrator's mom is able to remember these things. And then it goes forward in time to when the narrator is an adult already, and she works as a novelist, and her mother has been taken away by the memory police. And that's the thing that happened a couple years after the beginning, so they never say why they decide to take her mom, but they take her in a limo, and then she comes back dead, and they say it's death from a heart attack, but nobody can really prove it. Then her father, who works as an ornithologist, passes away. Then shortly after he passes away, they say birds are no longer allowed on the island, and everybody suddenly has to give up their pet birds. And her father's old lab gets destroyed, and all signs of birds are removed, and the memory police actually come to her house and raid it, and they go to her father's old office and they take everything that is a reminder of a bird. They have a family photograph with it's her dad and her mom, and they have a bird with them. They take the photograph with them. It's just a weird police state. And one day, while she's going to deliver her manuscript, she sees people getting rounded up and taken away, and she's like, wait a minute, I've never seen them take away a whole group of people before. Usually they just take one or two, based on whether or not they find out that they've been hoarding contraband, or whether or they can remember the forgotten items or whatever. But now they're starting to target whole groups of people, and her editor tells her that there's a whole network of safe houses being formed so they can get these people to safety. And it's a lot like the Holocaust, where they were hiding people. So where I'm at right now, which is still near the beginning, this the family of this scientist that basically they've helped her and her family out for years. So the family shows up at her house one night in secret, and they're on their way to flee to one of the safe houses, and they tell her that the father has been pegged to help with research to find people with genes that would allow them to remember these things that they're supposed to forget, and they don't want to help the government. They don't trust the government, so they decided to go into hiding. So things are getting progressively worse and worse. But before they go, they wanted to give her these statues that her mother left with them. They're these little statues, I'm guessing, because they're wrapped up in the family took it with them while they were escaping. And they said the mom gave it to them, entrusted the statues to them before she was taken away, because she was a sculptor. And So I'm wondering if like that's going to trigger something. But yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I want to see where it goes. Okay, like I said, I knew this would get long, but it's gotten very, very long, so let's end this right here, and I will see you next time. Bye!